Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about Mobius, Mobius.money, building the next generation of DeFi services with stablecoins. I'm excited to have today with me Dylan. Dylan, do you want to introduce yourself quickly to the audience in regards to Mobius and what you're doing here, your role?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Dylan. I'm one of the main developers working on Mobius. I'm part of what's called OpenCello. I'm the tech lead for OpenCello. We built Cello Hub as well as Mobius, and we're also currently working on a mobile DeFi wallet.
Amazing, amazing. I'm Brandy Camacho. I'm with developer relations, working on building and shaping Cello. So I'm excited today because I have with me a very technical engineer. I love the technical side. Obviously, we advocate for developers and building on the platform. We're in this new world of interoperability. And what fascinates me, Dylan, is Mobius has really shifted its focus around how you can take advantage of this new interoperability with stablecoins. And so what type of problems is Mobius? First, what is Mobius? Maybe just share a little bit to the audience that might not know Mobius, and then share some problems that you're solving with the user base.
Yeah, great question. So Mobius, first and foremost, is a cross-chain exchange for similarly pegged tokens. We view Mobius as kind of being the airport for bridging stablecoins onto Cello and from Cello to other chains. You mentioned interoperability, and that's kind of what Mobius seeks to empower with Cello and other chains. Because having these bridges from other chains such as Ethereum or Polygon to Cello is great, but if those bridge tokens don't have any utility or any purpose on Cello, then their only real use is to bridge them back for their native asset. And so Mobius, we seek to allow users to bridge over their stablecoins onto Cello and transfer to the Cello native stablecoins like CUSD, and then participate in the Cello ecosystem.
Yeah, that's amazing. So during this chat with us, we're going to end up having some questions from the audience. I just want to share with the audience right now that we do have an Ask a Question section. Feel free to ask a question in there. As we segue from topic to topic, we'll reflect back on the questions that have been asked. Like we have a question right now. It might be suitable since we're talking about accessibility here in a sense. You have a front end for Minto. Are you planning to do a front end for Swappa? Like I've used Swappa in the past. Interesting.
Yeah, so great question. I actually am working on finishing up our own trade router currently. And so we have plans to integrate that. Our trade router I'm working on is more of an on-chain solution to empower other developers to easily switch from one token to another in their contracts rather than having to compute the path off-chain. So we'll be integrating something like Swappa, but it won't be exactly Swappa.
That's interesting. It does make me think about front-end developers looking to integrate. What options are available for folks that are interested from Web 2? They're looking to get into Web 3. They see Mobius. They're getting excited. They want to interface with it because they have an idea for a thing. What's your suggestion?
First and foremost, I would recommend joining our Discord. That is, we respond pretty quickly to messages, and you can also message me directly if you have any questions about integrating with Mobius. Beyond that, the best way currently to integrate with Mobius is you can grab our ABIs from our front-end GitHub. That's just a large list of all the ABIs. And using your preferred Web3 provider or Web3 environment, such as like Brownie or Hardhat, etc. You can write scripts to interface with the Mobius contracts, or you can even create your own front end. We are in the early stages of working on a developer SDK for Mobius, so be on the lookout for that in the coming months.
Sweet. Can you share some insight? What would this Mobius SDK look like? Is it going to facilitate folks that are interested in like backend services?
It would facilitate basically all interactions with the Mobius platform. So this involves, simple things such as calculating the expected output of a swap without having to directly query the contract, to also kind of holding those contract ABIs and allowing users to just directly interface with those rather than worrying about grabbing the ABIs from a GitHub and then compiling those to the actual correct typings.
I take it there are going to be some nice little shortcuts with the SDK for rapid development. Is this SDK going to be open sourced?
Yes, it will.
Amazing. Amazing. And on that note, I noticed recently in Mobius that there's this new governance mechanism, and it's been maturing. It's almost like daily things are leveling up in regards to the experience on Mobius, which I'm a huge fan of. Can you share some light and shed some light in regards to why this is important? You know, maybe first off with like what it is, like why we have governance in the first place, and then why it's important.
Yeah, so to me, governance is really important because it allows our general community to have this huge say in kind of the future of our protocol. I think it's almost against the whole decentralized idea of decentralization if for the life of a protocol you still have the centralized team making all the decisions. I feel like it's just the general evolution of a protocol to go from the central founders to the community as a whole. And so for Mobius in general, we are very aggressively looking to switch to this fully decentralized model. We actually, in our most recent end of year roadmap, we released that we will be fully decentralized by the end of the year, with hopes that the community can enact this form of Mobi buyback and redistribute for Mobi stakers. And this is just a huge effort to really empower the community and give everybody a say rather than us assuming it's best for the protocol. It's best when people that actually actively use it can decide where it goes.
I love that. And right now, I was just trying to look it up because I think the roadmap is fantastic. The whole focus on the community and just the fact that, in a sense, you're like having a first to move advantage from the Celo ecosystem side. You came to the market, you're taking advantage of interoperability with bridging, but you're bridging so many other networks with your solution set. It's really becoming like a liquidity hub. So maybe fast forward a little bit in regards to that vision and shed some light in regards to the developer experience of this vision. So we have Mobius turning into full decentralized governance. We have an open source SDK. So from a year from now, what do you think developers should be looking out or potentially like tips of what they should be doing to plan ahead with this new interoperable world that we're in?
Yeah, so I think looking ahead with Mobius specifically, I see the future developer experience. If you wanted to integrate your own token, for instance, then that's something you could launch your own governance proposal for. And then the community itself could decide. On top of that, users could easily build on top of Mobius, leveraging, creating a cross-chain application, leveraging optics to kind of, in addition to just bridging, have a system where it bridges and then automatically swaps. So kind of using Mobius as liquidity pool on the receiving end of an actual bridging transaction, which I think would be pretty interesting to see. But I think the space needs to kind of evolve more in order to have that actually be fully effective.
So it's going to take some time from the community to participate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because one thing I notice is when it comes down to providing rewards, it largely depends on the community to do their votes. And if the community is not voting, well, then lack of access to those specific pools could affect the future of the growth of the platform itself. So maybe I noticed that Avalanche is part of a pool in there, and I saw that there is a request to vote. Could you share some insight on why that's important, why we have this in process in place with Mobius and with future pools that get added through the governance mechanism? What can the community do to prepare for these pools?
Yeah, so using the Avalanche pool as an example, Avalanche is obviously a very liquid chain. And so having the ability for users to bring their assets over from Avalanche onto Celo is pretty lucrative. That would introduce a lot more of liquidity onto Celo, and provides kind of a very useful pool to empower that interoperability between Celo and Avalanche. So from a community standpoint, in order to empower that, it's pretty easy. All users would need to do is, if they have staked Mobi on our staking page, they can simply go down and click on the Avalanche pool, and they can decide how much of the Mobi inflation they want to allocate to that pool. And then today at 5 p.m. PST is when those changes go into effect. And so next week, we will see some inflation being allocated towards the Avalanche pool, which will bring in more liquidity and allow that interoperability.
Now, touch base on inflation. I think folks might not understand that. Could be the first time they heard of it. We know what inflation is generally with fiat currencies, but what's it mean with Mobius?
Yeah, so Mobius has a set number. Mobi has a set number of tokens that are minted every week. And so that is kind of our weekly inflation rate, is the number of tokens that are minted per week. And so that number can then be distributed across all of our pools. And so when a user votes for, say, the Avalanche pool to receive 10% of the inflation, what they are really voting for is for 10% of the total tokens minted that week to go towards the Avalanche pool. And go towards providing incentives for Avalanche pool.
That's the incentive piece. That's the reward side. That's the motivation for liquidity providers to provide liquidity in that pool, because they're going to get these rewards, and those rewards derive from the inflationary asset over time.
Exactly. And it's also a representation of kind of the effectiveness of the pools. Once it's almost a catch-22, because in order to get the liquidity into a pool, it needs to be incentivized. And then once that happens, the amount of incentives a pool receives is kind of reflective of its general usefulness. By looking at our pools, you can see that most APRs are around the same, which means that largely whatever percent of inflation or percent of Mobi minting is allocated towards the pool is generally the percent of the TVL that pool will have. And so we really want to try and figure out what pools are the most useful, and then subsequently incentivize those. So it's really up to the community to kind of view voting on pool weights as more of a selfless actor for the betterment of the Mobius protocol and for the betterment of interoperability, rather than voting 100% for only the pool they are currently providing liquidity in.
You know, it makes sense, because when I first started, I was selfish. I was like, oh no, I just want to vote for the pool that I'm putting liquidity in. And then I was reading the updates, the announcements in Discord. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. We want to incentivize participation in this network. By doing so, it embraces the community effect, the network effect with the community. It attracts other liquidity providers, helps mature the pooling offerings, and then in that sense, it grows the ecosystem. So it's good for everybody. And I definitely started allocating my vote shares appropriately with that mindset shift. It's like, oh, that makes sense. I want to help grow too the ecosystem. Can you by any chance demonstrate like the user interface, the governance side of Mobius, and any other items within the interface that you would like to show off to the audience today?
Yeah, definitely. Let me share my screen.
Cool.
Okay, and just making sure you can see that, see everything okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so this is the general swap screen for Mobius. This is where users can obviously swap between these different tokens. And if we very quickly go to the pool page, we can see that the Avalanche pool, it only has 56 total liquidity, but that is obviously an effect that is not incentivized. So if users were to provide liquidity here, there's a huge opportunity cost on the APR they could potentially be receiving on those stablecoins. So as we were talking about earlier, users can go to our stake page. And here, I've already locked a small amount of Mobi, so I can't fully demonstrate it. But here, if user has not locked any Mobi, they can choose to lock Mobi, and they set the specific date that they are locking until, and then they set the specific amount of Mobi that they wish to lock. And in addition to allowing users to vote for pool weights, this locking mechanism also serves as a way for users to boost their effective liquidity provided to the pools. So from the pool's perspective, when it is handing out rewards for providing liquidity, it weights your effective liquidity by your total, your ratio of voting power to the total voting power of the platform. And so that's what this calculator is right here. So for any of the pools, you can select one, and then you can figure out how much VE Mobi you need to get a specific boost. And then moving over to voting, we can see here that the Avalanche pool has been voted for a tiny bit. So maybe that message in Discord did some good. But for example, if a user wants to vote for the Avalanche pool, you can see up here that it says I have 100% left to allocate. So under this account, I have not done any voting yet. So for example, I can click on this, and let's say we think it should receive about, like, let's say 16% of next week's inflation. So of all Mobi minted next week, it should receive, well, the slider went to 14%, so 14%. And then we can vote for it. And load up on MetaMask.
Gotta love MetaMask.
Yeah. Also, bear with the speed of my computer. I'm running some machine learning models for some other stuff right now. So that's taking up a little bit of computing power. But it goes through. And so with that, it's as easy as that for the community to vote to allocate inflation towards a specific pool. And you can see that it went through right over there.
The next time you vote, and if you use that percentage, does it readjust towards the previous vote, the percentage, so that way you can allocate appropriately? Let's say you've selected 4 pools, you want to divide it up 25% each pool. So the first vote, you did 25%. The next vote, do you slide that over to 25% to maintain the equal division of your voting power?
Yes. So the percent shown, like you can see now that I just voted 14%. It might not show very well when I'm sharing my screen, but it tells me I have 86% left to allocate. So the percent shown is assuming of that 100% of inflation, how much of that you can still allocate. So if I were to try to vote for the Avalanche pool again, it'll tell me right now I can't, because you can only change your vote every 10 days for a specific pool. But if I were to vote for the USDC Optics pool, you can see that it tells me I have 86% left to allocate. And so that is of the total 100% allocation, I have that 86% left.
So I've learned this myself. So at first, if you put 25% now, it's 25% at this point of 86%.
I believe if you, yes. So if you click the 25%, yes, it goes to the percent of that total percent you have left.
super cool. Quick question. If you were to go into mobile view using the Chrome inspector, because I'm assuming you're using Chrome on this, does this work great on mobile?
Yes, I will just have to refresh the page once I get it. Yeah, let me just refresh it.
This is by far my favorite way to test UI.
Oh yeah, it's so nice. It makes it much easier when I don't have to just go over to my phone all the time.
And you also can connect your phone up. Like there's a way that you can do wireless debugging with Chrome Inspector tools. So that way you can have your device connected over the wireless network and you can simulate. Pretty interesting. Cool stuff. Powerful.
Yes. Okay, so this is the view of the same staking page, but from a mobile perspective. So while the data loads in, we overhauled our entire UI a week or two ago with the intent of giving kind of this almost native mobile app experience to people on phones. And so it was an interesting exercise scaling that from an initial mobile design to how it should look on desktop. But it was really designed for mobile. And we can go over to the vote page. Sometimes on the Chrome view, it doesn't look exactly like it will, but you can see we just try to make it as mobile friendly as possible.
And although the Chrome Inspector is such a benefit to the development lifecycle of testing before you go into production, prod, it's buggy, right? Like it's not perfect. It's just a great way to rapidly make adjustments. Like right here, I believe you can start hacking the user interface just in CSS. You can just highlight something and be like, oh, this should really be bigger and start. Exactly. It's fantastic for developers when they're like doing the mobile first approach. They can just start testing it out. And another thing is like the app media queries. Sometimes those can be so daunting to go through and make sure it fits correct on all the devices. Such a saturated market of all these devices. So I love using this for adjusting my app media queries for user.
Yeah. I entirely agree. I think for me, one of the biggest roadblock for entering kind of a full stack development role was all the styling for web development. I think especially coming from more of like academia type development, going towards HTML and CSS, trying to build out front ends, it seems pretty daunting, especially with how many different options there are. So I'm a big proponent of kind of just styling in the dev tools and then copying that over to your actual CSS.
Which is amazing. Like I wish I had those tools earlier when I was doing front end development, because it was a mess. It was just jQuery. I don't know if you remember that. Oh my gosh. But it's still used today, which is interesting. jQuery is still powerful.
Yeah, I have rarely, if ever, used jQuery. So
no,
I'm actually still I am still a university student. So I'm in my senior year at Cal Poly.
Oh, well done. Good job. So yeah, mobile web's still a thing. Like there's still folks who got mobile native, the mobile web. And so you can wrap your web project into what appears to be a native mobile experience. A lot of tooling is available. But one thing that I love about the mobile first design approach is just supporting the accessibility. Because like with Mobius, with all the different bridging that's going on, we just got a little taste of it. So like the future of interoperability is going to get more intense. More options are going to get developed as maturity continues in the space. But with that comes with greater tooling for developers. So really looking forward to streamlining and standardizing. I think if anything, we kind of have a standards issue because there are so many options. Like under the hood, jQuery is used a lot of time. People don't even know it. They're like, oh, I just got whatever, Expo. And like, Expo works great, but little do you know about the dependencies. And that's That's probably one tip that I have for developers. Try to keep your dependencies as simple as possible, if possible.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. So the folks looking at Mobius and their developers, and like I was mentioning earlier, the Web 2 folks, the mobile folks, or even existing Web 3 folks, they like this mobile first design idea. Going over to Celo is a mobile first blockchain, and there's some enhancements that's happening on the protocol layer. What is your like number one advice for folks that are entering this saying, I'm going to build a heck of an app and everybody in the world is going to love it? And they're like, it's Web3. Everybody's going to love it. What's your advice to them, like to keep them grounded?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen for now. I would say if you're trying to make a app that everybody will love, I think that's pretty hard. You really have to decide what market you're going to try to cater towards, because an interface for a DeFi power user is going to look a lot different than an interface for somebody that doesn't know anything about DeFi and is just trying to enter the scene. So the UX there will be entirely dependent on the actual market you're trying to target. So I think a good way to go about this is to kind of release a lower fidelity or a not as intense version of an application, kind of targeting users that might not necessarily need as much information, but they kind of, or almost having more information can kind of scare them away. So it'd be like people newer to the crypto scene that are just interested in earning these higher yields. And then on top of that, offering kind of a pro version, kind of like Coinbase Pro, where that is targeted more towards power users who kind of need all of that extra information. Because trying to satisfy both at the same time, I think it could be possible, but I think it'll end up being a much larger headache than it would be to just build out separately for the two and prioritize one over the other for your initial time. This is something that I'm currently experiencing as I'm building out Centro, which is OpenCello's DeFi wallet. We are really initially building this out to kind of target entirely new users to crypto and just kind of abstracting away all of the complexities. So our UX there is going to be a lot more streamlined, a lot more smooth, not as much information shown, more just how much money you've deposited, the APRs for specific strategies and specific pools. Whereas moving towards more of like a power user situation, we would be showing a lot more stats, like the specific distributions for a pool, the volume for a pool over time, how the volume's changing, as well as also getting into like working with private keys, because the general user might almost be scared by, giving them a private key and saying this controls your entire account, whereas a power user wants that private key because they want to know that they have that control.
Well said. Understanding your user base is one of the most essential pieces during the early stages of development, because that allows you to distinguish between the average user and the pro user, because depending on your solution, you might need to target the pro user at first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we had a question from Boone saying, best open source UI UX you have seen for DeFi, please. And I'm curious about this too. I'm like, what? I know about material design. I love UI enhancement, but specific to DeFi, any tips on that?
I don't know if there's any specific for DeFi. I think for like something like a exchange, you're gonna see kind of generally the same design over and over, kind of the overall like Uniswap front end. In that case, it's not exactly a tool, but just like forking that overall like Uniswap front end and then changing it for your liking kind of speeds along that overall UX development. Besides that, outside of just DeFi in general, I like Figma for UI and UX. And also my business partner uses Photoshop. So it's really just whatever is easiest for you, to just work as best and fast as you can.
And one tip I have: search Google, type in their UI kits, free open source UI kits. You'll get a fascinating list. Another way to adjust the parameters with Google is you have the ability to do an advanced search, and you can search by time. So you can say, hey, Google, give me all the UI open source kits in this space in the last 30 days. And then if you can't find anything in the last 30 days, extend it to 90 days. That's a great way to discover some cool UI kits. Because I hear you, I want to develop as fast as possible, which brings me, Dylan, we got a hackathon going on and we're nearing the end, right? We have projects that are starting to wrap things up. So when I think about back in the day when I was attending hackathons, it was super important, kind of confusing about what you should do. What are those touch points for doing a fantastic delivery of a pitch for your project? And I've experienced my projects being a different vision at the end than it was originally of the hackathon. That brought in some stress. We had to mitigate and manage that. Then next was like the technicals. I noticed that sometimes I would just go ahead and pitch way too much in regards to the technical underpinnings of the project versus the solution. And I'm like, if I was to go back in time and re-attend these hackathons, I totally would do it differently. And I would first start off with like the story, why I'm doing this in the first place. What's your tip?
I would say something along the same lines. I'd say when you're presenting, to focus on initially the problem that you're trying to solve, and then how your specific solution solves that problem. I'm not sure if there's a time limit for the hackathon videos, but if you have time, then you can dive more into the more technical side of how that happens. But I think what's most important is what the actual problem is that's being solved, and then how that's being solved by your solution, and ways that your solution is unique compared to others that might attempt to solve the same thing.
And how complex should it be? Should it be a full functional app?
I think it doesn't have to be a fully functional app. I think it's best if it is a fully functional app, but also something like a minimal viable product, I think is definitely good as well. Something that kind of proves your concept and proves that what you're trying to build is possible. I think I kind of view hackathons as ways to prove an idea I have could be, fully fleshed out program. Obviously, due to the high-speed nature of hackathons, you're not always going to have the best development practices. And so I think it's almost naive to assume that you just take a hackathon project and just use that same code base to try and ship to a fully product ready application, because you're bound to have at least, I would think, a lot of bugs from how fast you're going to be developing. I can say from my perspective, we made initially Centro back at the Celo Make It Mobile hackathon way back in May of last year. And afterwards, we had proved that it was possible, and then we totally scrapped our code base and restarted from scratch, because we wanted to go at it with much better development practices than just trying to rush out a product for a deadline.
And that's good advice there, because being a visionary is super important to the story. Once you have a vision, you can carry through the story. And there's the story of being the developer, right? It doesn't always have to be about your users. And so when you think about what you just shared, it's like, it's okay to use boilerplates. It's okay to fork repos if it's going to get your vision across as swiftly as possible for a hackathon. You're trying to show off some functionality, and if there's already been workings done before with a community project, utilize it. I think Mobius, when I was reviewing the risk, which I love, by the way, I love how just right plain in sight, you say, here's the risk. You're very transparent. You said we forked Nerve and built on top of that.
We forked,
right?
Did you say, Nerve.
Nerve, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope I said that.
Yeah.
But I love that transparency, and that's grit. That's exactly what developers and most verticals of software engineering actually do. They look for fantastic projects that have already proven not only the use case, but they harden the repository. So that way you don't have to revisit the security over and over again. It's like, well, this has already been proven to be secure. It's stand the test of time. It's been iterated on. Why reinvent the wheel? Let's go ahead and enhance it with our use case, wrap it up, and then build from there. Do you want to share some first, like why you decided to do that, and maybe share advice for folks thinking about doing a similar approach?
I think you touched on it very well by saying, like, don't reinvent the wheel. I think there's a lot of DeFi primitives and general DeFi ideas that have already been built out and already been vetted. And so if you try to re-implement those themselves, one, if you end up with the same exact protocol or same exact kind of overall protocol, then that's overall time you're wasting. And two, you open yourself up to security risks that might not have been present in whatever protocol you're using as inspiration. So by directly kind of forking a vetted, audited protocol, you know that it works, and you know that it has been proven to work and proven to be secure. And so then you can have the peace of mind of that while you kind of figure out how you want to transform it and kind of add upon it and innovate upon it.
Well said. Well said. I love your project. I think what's going on right now with the community, the incentives, the vision to make sure that you stay in touch with the community is one thing that I think I admire the most with projects. And I would certainly advocate for with all the developers out there working on the project. We need more of that in the space, because if we can't grow the community, then we're going to have a bit of a problem in regards to the adoption cycle for this technology. What's cool about Mobius is just the fact that it's like the intersect of liquidity amongst these bridges with stablecoins. And I find that fascinating in regards to the growth cycle, because it could mean so much more in the future. And for developers to be thinking about this now, it's an opportunity. And I think the opportunity should be basically, announced. That's what I'm trying to do here, is just make sure you know, if you're interested in this space and you want to contribute, my goodness, Mobius is a fantastic project to dig into. The Celo ecosystem certainly loves you guys. You have the project fully open source where people can go in there and participate in the sandbox. You shared the GitHub repository already in this thread. I've seen that you did that for the ABIs, but developers can go there too, right? If they want to help contribute to product, or if they want to reach out, they can just open up.
Exactly.
Request.
Yeah. Developers can submit pull requests. We've had one community member submit a pull request a month back or so. Just out of the blue, just made a pull request for some small bug fix in the UI. But it's pretty cool to see that we had some community engagement. Developers can just fork our UI, and then from that fork submit a pull request. And either I or Kyle, both of us, probably review it and either suggest changes or merge it in. And it's basically that simple to try and help us out.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for spending time today. I think we covered a lot about Mobius, the opportunities available, all the developers out there. Hopefully you're paying attention in regards to hackathons, like take advantage of these opportunities. Look at projects like Mobius for how you can plan your go-to-market strategy. Mobius too was in your position where they had to think, how do I get my project across the finish line so we can go ahead and reach prod environment? And I think it doesn't stop there, right? And the vision continues on, and you have new challenges ahead of you. But that's the exciting part of being a developer. Unknowns. Yeah, it's like, where can this go? Super cool. Well, thank you for your time today. I think that's it. Unless you have any questions.
I don't have any questions. It looks like there aren't any in the chat besides the one. So yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been great talking to you and just talking about Mobius.
Yeah.
Anybody watching, feel free to join the Discord. Reach out to me. I'll put my Discord handle in the chat. I'm fairly punctual in responding. So if you have any questions, just let me know.
The
Where is our Discord?
Discord. That's a good one. I was like, well, here's the username.
Yeah, let me.
So thanks for keeping us in check. Good grief. We need to make sure we get that invite link.
Yes. I'm grabbing it right now.
Thank you so much. It's a good community. I also like the fact that it's there for everybody. Like everybody's participating and sharing information. I learn not just by reviewing. Like oftentimes I just review at a high level to see what's going on. And some of the topic points are certainly interesting. Like the development, like Brownie, I didn't even know. I'm like, oh, Python, like I've done some Python programming. It's not my main forte, but I use it for data science, right? Like when you're talking about machine learning, I'm like, oh, I love Python for that. And I learned about Brownie through you guys. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I like Brownie for just like general purpose scripts. For actual like deployments and stuff, I find I prefer something like Hardhat, just because it gives them more control. But Brownie's definitely good for writing just like scripts to interact with your contracts.
Yeah, it's good for the developers that are used to Truffle and they're programming JavaScript, and then they're like, I'm doing this project with Python. What is a similar framework? And that's Brownie.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, exactly.
Coolness. All right, Dylan, you have an awesome day. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. And thanks to the community for tuning in. All right, you have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye.